Welcome back to another episode on the abandoned STI presented by Turn 14 Distribution. We've got to pull the motor back out and we're about to explain why. It turns out there may have been a failure to communicate because we have just learned that the cam position sensors are different on the JDM and USDM motors. You can see that the spacing is different on these two sensors. So we've got to do a little bit of dremeling on the cylinder heads so that we can get the USDM sensor in there in the correct position. And that means pulling the motor out and getting it on an engine stand probably to get it in the right position so that Pete can get in there and delicately do that bit of dremeling that we need to do to get this in there properly. So we should have known that before we put the motor in, but Nam just brought it to our attention and we thought, oh, okay, well then let's get this out of here. So Nam's actually on his way over now to help us pull this out and help Pete tackle this little bit of extra work. It's a Friday evening though, and I've got to go do some parenting, so these evening wrenching sessions have turned into Pete and Nam time. So I am bailing once again, just in time for these guys to get my daily driver tuned up properly for me. So thanks guys, I am out of here.
You're welcome, DP. We are just the best friends, right?
You are. I might even let you take it home once or twice.
Oh, great. How nice of you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm big that way.
Welcome back, Nam, to your second home away from NV Auto, right?
Yeah.
It's turning into it. So Dave already mentioned a little bit about the cam sensors, but why don't you actually tell us what our big issue here is?
Yeah, so the USDM ECUs reads a 3-wire Hall effect sensor, whereas the JDM sensor uses a 2-wire alternate current sensor. And so with now, we're going to have to install the new USDM cam sensor where the JDM sensor is, but unfortunately it doesn't really line up with the I guess the trigger of the camshaft. So what we're gonna have to do now is we're gonna pull the engine out, and the only reason we need to pull the engine out is to make sure that we don't have any filings that are falling into the cylinder heads when we are dremeling it out. So we got to be careful with that. It is something that you can dremel out, but then you can make a mistake of getting filings in there or metal in there and causing a whole bunch more problems. So we're actually not that far off from pulling the engine out again. It's going to take us a couple minutes to do, so we're going to do that right now, and we're going to show you what we need to do in order to make the new cam sensor work. So now with the sensor in place, you can see that the sensor on this side does line up with the trigger on the camshaft here. So with this, as you can see it from above, all we need to do is modify the sensor where it's mounted to in order to get that to bolt up. But on the driver's side here, you can see this is the side that we need to modify it a little bit. We need to move this cam sensor towards the front a little bit, so which means we need to dremel out the hole where the sensor sits. So one thing we need to do is we need to move the hole of the sensor closer towards the sensor, which means we're going to have to knock out this metal collar, and we're going to use a punch that's the exact same size as this metal collar and a socket. We're going to pound this collar out.
Bam, there we go.
So after removing the valve cover on the driver's side here, I put a little bit of piece of cardboard here just to help with the all the metal filings going into the path of the vacuum when we have the vacuum on. And we're going to use the carbide bit here, and I've marked where we're going to machine it a little bit. And we're just going to tilt this engine all the way down, as far down as possible, so we can have the vacuum on it and not have any metal filings falling into the cylinder head when we're machining this. So with the Dremel tool, we dremeled out the surface where the mounting is going to happen, and we've got that so the sensor can sit flush onto the cylinder head. And now that we've moved this hole out towards the front of the engine, you can see the sensor kind of sits perfectly centered on the camshaft.
Nice.
And we didn't have to clean too much. I mean, there's not really any filings that fall inside the cylinder head because we did it with the engine on a tilt in the vacuum. But we are going to clean it out a little bit before we put the valve cover gasket back on. And now we're going to modify all this stuff to the passenger side of the head, get the passenger side working, and then we're going to Dremel out the sensor itself in order to mount the new sensor onto the head. So as you can see, the hole is much larger than the O-ring on the sensor, but we're going to actually make a gasket later on to seal this up. And with the fact that this sensor is actually above the cylinder head on the top portion here, you won't actually get any leak, but we will definitely put a gasket and some sealer on there to make sure you don't get any leak at all. So on the passenger side here, you can see that the sensor already lines up to the cam trigger on the camshaft here, and the only thing you really need to do is just open up the hole for the mounting bolt for the sensor, which we've done there, and you can still utilize the factory O-ring, and that's all we need to do on the passenger side. So now we've got both sides done, and all we have to do is put the valve covers back in and get the engine back in the car, and afterwards we'll make the gaskets for the cylinder heads, and we'll mount these back up once they're in the car.
And just like that, we have our motor in place. Nam has buttoned everything up, and our transmission is also secured. So if you recall, in a previous episode, we ended up taking out the whole shifter assembly. That was to paint this up so it would look much nicer. It was very, very rusty. And before we put this back, I have a small upgrade to make, and that is from Great North Performance. This is their rear shifter stay, and they're actually Canadian. Their products are made in Canada as well, so cool little company. Definitely check them out. And as you can see, our old stock one is very worn out. The actual hole has been ovalized. I don't know if you can see that or not, but this is a good upgrade because it actually stiffens up a lot of the shifter. They also offer polyurethane bushing for up in here. I opted out of that because I'm trying to keep a lot of this car street friendly. There you have it. Our GMP shifter stay is in place. I am very eager to test it out. I know we're gonna be banging some gears here real soon. And I think that is officially done for tonight. Nam, thank you so much for all the help. We are getting there. Well, DP, what do you think? Can you feel the difference in the shifter? I put that Great North Performance shifter stay in last night with Nam.
Oh wow, yeah, that feels really good.
It just feels more solid, right?
It does feel a lot more solid, and strangely it feels a little more precise somehow. I've always liked these STI gearboxes. They have a really nice shifter feel, but yeah, it feels a lot more solid.
Well, that bushing was really worn out, actually, the more I looked at it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that feels great, and the clutch feels good too. Like, it's slightly higher effort than stock, but for a twin disc, I'm like, wow, that's actually going to be a pleasure to drive. And I don't think we have any like crazy plans for modifying the interior, but I don't know about you, but I'm not crazy about the stock shift knob. To me, it kind of feels just like a regular Impreza knob. Like, there's nothing special about it. So to add a little spice to the interior, we went to our friends at Raceseng, who make some super cool shift knobs. They have a huge lineup of different designs and styles of shift knobs, and we really like this new component shop system that they offer. And as the name implies, you can get multiple components that all kind of interchange really easily. Look at that, pretty easy to install. And I didn't really think about it before, but it's actually taller than the stock shift knob, so it puts the shifter in a nicer location, I think, for being a little closer to the steering wheel. So it'd be interesting to see if that affects shift quality at all, but I really like the position it's in, really like how clean it looks. But since we have this other one, we say we throw it on there, and you guys can tell us in the comments which one you like better. So to change the black part out, we just use the optional tool here that slides into these two grooves underneath. Crack that loose, and then this, as you can see, threads right out. Look at the fit and finish on that, man. Look at that. I have that oriented all wrong, but I'll tune it up here. Oh yeah, it's perfect. There you go. Are you guys a cylinder fan or a sphere fan? Let us know. You guys might be wondering why we're not slamming away in the engine bay, getting the engine install finished, and that's because we're waiting on a couple of parts. So in the meantime, we figured we'd install the sway bars, because with the engine in the front, we can install the front sway bar, and with everything up here, we can install the rear bar, which I think we were waiting on as well, but it's here obviously. So this is a 24 mil SuperPro sway bar, 3-way adjustable, comes with poly bushings that we'll install momentarily, and we also have SuperPro's end links, which also have poly bushings to take any unwanted, slop out of the system. This bar is obviously quite a bit bigger than the stock bar, and being adjustable, it'll let us really dial in the front to rear roll stiffness, and in the process, adjust the handling balance. So obviously the goal is to get as much understeer out of the car as we can. Subarus are a little bit notorious for understeer, but we can definitely get rid of it with something like this, as well as our KW dampers. That'll give us the adjustability to really get this thing carving corners the way we like. So let's bolt this thing up with those bushings and those fancy brackets that JP powder coated for us. Let's get to work here. As you can see, we are all super pro'd up back here. Sway bars in place with poly bushings, and their SuperPro end links as well. And interestingly, they include these braces here, these supports that tie in the subframe to the bracket points for the sway bars. I assume that's because it's a stiffer roll bar and it's going to put more stress into this sort of, I don't know what you call this, where the brackets mount up. Maybe there's some flex that happens there and this brace gets rid of that. I don't know. You guys tell me what you think that's about, but more stiffness is never a bad thing in the back end of a Subaru. So up front, we've gone with SuperPro's 2-way 22 mil heavy duty sway bar in their 3-stage coating, which is super durable. In fact, I could even winter daily drive this if I choose to.
Don't even say that.
I know, that'd be blasphemy, wouldn't it? But the coating would stand up to it, even if the rest of the car wouldn't. So just like the back, it's got your usual 2 bushings and mounting points. So we'll slap this on there now and show you what it looks like bolted up. Now that the sway bar is bolted in place, we are connecting it to the rest of the suspension via these Great North Performance end links. As you can see, they use a red urethane 90A stiffness bushing in them, and the bodies are CNC
Aluminum?
T6061 aluminum, I think.
I think so.
CAD designed and made and designed in the Great White North here in Canada.
Yeah, just like I already told people that. We're proud of that.
We are. It's nice to put a little Canada on here. As you can see, Pete's already bolted this side up. And the beauty of these end links is that they're much stiffer and stronger than the OE ones, which apparently tend to have quite a bit of flex in them. And if the end links are flexing, then it's going to delay the responsiveness of the sway bar. So by having a stiffer, stronger end link, you're going to get more immediate response out of the sway bar and roll, which should just make the car feel like it's basically more responsive when you're turning or when weight's being moved from side to side in the car. So nice little bit of tuning, Canadian style right there. So we're going to bolt this other one up. And that, I think, will be a wrap on today's episode. So thank you very much for watching, everyone. We are making really good progress here on my new daily driver. So I'm excited to start to bang some gears in this thing. But before I can do that, and maybe Pete too, we have a bit of work to do in the engine bay, don't we? That's, I guess, where we're going next. Like we said earlier, we're waiting on a few parts, but those should show up soon. So we will get back under the hood, get to turn some wrenches, and then maybe even the dyno someday.